Hi there, it's Fritrinker. I made an image that I think will be the outcome in the medium term, let's say the next 5 years of what's going on in the world right now. And that is that the US and China will come to a new agreement about the division of Saudi oil, basically using their currencies. And that's already happening. China made a deal with Saudi Arabia that Saudi Arabia will accept yuan for in return for the oil. Uh, that's not really that significant. That people make that very significant, but the whole perspective for Saudi Arabia is that they have a bunch of oil that's useless. They cannot eat it. They cannot drive around in it. Then they give the oil to countries that come up with some currency, and they get that currency like dollars or yuan in this case. And then with the currency, they can buy the stuff that those countries make with the energy that they provide to those countries. So basically they buy, and then the the thing that makes it a little bit frustrating for Saudi Arabia if they hadn't accepted it is that okay, so now you buy stuff in Germany or something like that with euros that you sold the oil for, and then those companies have euros and they come back to you and they buy oil from you again. So the same currency can circulate back and forth between Saudi Arabia and the country like America or Germany or China, if it's one, back and forth. But Saudi Arabia keeps handing over oil and gets back stuff, but only the stuff is only worth between brackets because that becomes a very difficult concept value, but only gets part of what the oil really produces. The rest is just for China. So it's basically giving away oil. This is something that most people don't understand about fossil energy, is that it's basically given away. And whoever owns the oil wells, so maybe it's Saudi Arabia, maybe it's Alaska or something like that, they get a small portion they get a lot of money maybe, but they can't do anything with it. So Saudi Arabia got a lot of money for a long time and put it in Wall Street and in houses and stuff like that, but that just doesn't do anything. And then they spent a little bit of that money on stuff that they like. So Ferraris and Lamborghinis and whatever, and a lot of women in the harem and big buildings, and they can do that. But there's an end to that. There's no reason for them. Like all these people live like kings and princes. But that gets boring pretty fast, and then it becomes competitive. Otherwise, it would end. If you're not competitive and jealous, then there's no reason to spend money all the time. Anyway, so the point of this part of my explanation is that Saudi Arabia really doesn't care. It's the same difference. Like if it sells oil for yuan, it gets Chinese stuff, and I think the important change might be that it wants some Chinese stuff. The Chinese make more interesting stuff. And then, and if it sells it in dollars, it can buy stuff in America or in the dollar zone, which is Africa and South America. So it doesn't really care. China doesn't really care because, if the whole region around China would be yuan denominated, that just means that now these regions have to sell stuff to China that to earn those yuan in order to buy oil with yuan to produce stuff for China. Well, that basically means they become China, but it also means that they have to deliver something to China that China can't produce itself, and China has a massive overproduction capacity, so it doesn't really care about that. Uh, and of course, America and the dollar zone are well known and accepted and etc. And it doesn't really make a difference. So basically, the only difference that it would make would be that China has a little easier time getting oil from the Middle East. And then why would this deal be made? Why would, let's say, the dollar dominance or dollar acceptance remain and oil be sold for dollars? Well, first reason is that it doesn't really matter to the Middle East. It doesn't matter at all. Second is that US is helping China acquire massive resources in Russia. This war with Ukraine is basically a handover of access to Russian resources to China. funded by the US and US weapons and Ukrainian lives. This sounds really maybe this is real politics. What I'm talking about. This is what that's my understanding for real politics is. And also, economic factors are always made more important because what do you want to do after all? Do you want to have a world war that destroys everything and you have to rebuild everything and there's chaos and trouble? Well, some idiots and ideologists may want that, but bankers, the ones that fund everything, that I always say are so annoyingly powerful, they don't want that. They don't want a world war. I mean, they want wars to generate cash flow, but not the type of wars that destroys the whole system, that makes the earth, let's say, uninhabitable for like 50 years. That's not the type of war they want. So there's no incentive in the system to go all out. There is a huge beneficial deal for China being made at the moment. Let's say a situation created by the US and Europe. It's a huge gift. So this is very balanced, I think. So if China was greedy, which it is, or I mean, it is trying to capture land, and it's everybody complains about colonial past, but everybody behaves exactly the same when they have the same power. It's just because there's always greedy men running the show, greedy, aggressive men. It may sound sexist again, but it's always like these heavy meat-eating men that just that are greedy, and they are everywhere. There's no difference around the world. They're in Africa, they're in America, they're in China, they're everywhere, and they always become the leaders of new initiatives because they're greedy. Like the non-greedy people, they sit in the farm and they eat a little, let's say, ananas and banana and live in peace. But then somewhere there's a war going on because there's greedy men. They're always there. Anyway, but there won't be, let's say, there won't be a lot of, let's say, this I think is what's in development. So what the whole war in Ukraine will result in. And then there's still Israel. Well, that's kind of a bit of a disappointment. Those Holocaust survivors and terribly morally, let's say, preachers about how to respect religion, etc. They don't give a very good example. No matter what Hamas did, it's also horrible. But I think that pretty early on, it was visible that Europe and the US have Egypt as an alternative to Israel in the Middle East. So I guess, and that's smart. So you have to have a workaround in case all hell breaks loose, even though you try to prevent it. But I think that many people are now pretty sick of Israel, fed up, and everything that you say is anti-Semitic about them, and only the death of the dancers of the festival are horrible, but not the fact that 20 times as much people from Palestine have been killed in the whole history of Israel's, let's say, land acquisition in Palestine. Every time there was murder, it was always 20 times as many Palestinians that died than Israelis. And that's, I think, become a lot more. So that's not really relevant to the whole story. So that's why I made this image. And I think it's a prediction. It's an optimistic prediction. And then the only thing that has to happen is that Iran gets, let's say, loses its religious leadership. So one guy, basically two people down, two deeply evil people down. One was a religious leader, and the other one was basically a tool in his hands, also religious. And then it has to, let's say, go a little bit further, and then Iran turns secular or Christian, maybe even, you don't know, but at least it gets let's say, a non-religious leadership, because there's nothing more insane than religious leadership. I mean, you have the least brave man and in charge. So some guy that dresses up and preaches and tries to bring fear in the minds of people with words and promises, let's say, virgins in heaven and etc. All that bullshit, and then you put them in charge of your country. That is completely insane. That's like very unusual. I mean, in the past, leaders, kings. I guess it happens when you have a kingdom that's created or a realm of power. Then the leader has to fight. That has always been the historic past. Now we are past that because of economics, but then subsequently they sometimes became religious, and then religion tried to take over the power and become a controlling force. But that's just hypnosis, psychology, manipulation, and superstition. I mean, Israel is a little bit insane like that. Hamas is insane like that. Iran is insane like that. It leads to insanity. And I think that will all be cured eventually, because Iranian people don't like it at all. So it's just a matter of time, I think. They just have to find the tools to overthrow their government. And but then I guess those are the most important forces at play in the world stage at the moment, I think. And so that's why I made this image. And then I think that Kamala will win the elections, and that's something we should hope for. Otherwise, we get 4 years of moronic remarks and behavior. But it will still be economistic behavior. So it will still all be for profit and greedy men. And greedy men don't want the world to be destroyed. So it will probably be a similar outcome. Anyway, that's my prediction. I hope you find it interesting and entertaining. And thanks for listening.